Because the health and fitness world can get a little nutty, it's time for body kindness. Today we're going to chat about eating, when you're feeling happy, sad, and everything in between.
And for our Boost Your Mood Challenge, we're going to talk about how fitness can get you feeling fantastic. Plus, we're starting a book club.
Hello and welcome to Body Kindness, where happiness and health begin by being good to yourself. I'm your host and coach, Rebecca Scritchfield, and I've got Bernie Salazar here again with me.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening in.
So Bernie, today is the day. We are, well, I think it's been a few episodes coming. We've kind of hinted at getting ready to talk about, a very important topic. I think a very difficult topic for you and for me. And I think for a lot of people who are tuning and listening, and that is really starting to address emotional eating.
I am ready. As you can tell just from my tone. Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, emotional eating is something that I have dealt with not just recently, but my entire life. And I am ready to start understanding it more so that I can be ready for it as I encounter it along my journey. So let's get going, Becca. I'm ready. Okay.
Well, I thought that what would be really good is that if we just chatted about where you're at right now and what's going on right now, and we can kind of see where that conversation goes and just see kind of what unfolds, what your concerns are and how I might be able to help. And, it's certainly emotional eating is not the kind of thing that gets resolved for anyone just for talking about it for 15 or 20 minutes. But I think that developing an understanding and in a weird kind of a way, a appreciation or a sense of gratitude for what it's trying to do for you can really be helpful in helping you understand yourself better and help moving on from it as well.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, in my particular situation, I'm just going to jump right in.
Mm-hmm.
After having gone through my experience of being on the weight loss show that I was on, everything that has come afterwards, where I felt as though it was now my new responsibility to keep weight off, and to be an ambassador for health, when not even 4 or 5 months before I was the complete opposite of that. And don't get me wrong, I continue to find such joy and gratification out of talking about what it means to be healthy. But I've learned throughout my time speaking on this topic that I myself haven't necessarily come to terms with everything that it means to be healthy, at least what it looks like in my life. So along this journey, I have had my points where I have been using food, whether it be small bits here and there or larger meals here and there, to address certain emotions that maybe I'm having. For me, I think initially it was a lot of, well, you can't have that. So in the quiet of my own home, or when I was kind of away from the audiences that I was addressing, I would kind of sneak in some things here and there. And it wasn't necessarily that I was sad or happy, but I guess it's almost, it's an addiction. I guess for me, it feels that way, where it's like, well, let me go ahead and get this in really quick before somebody sees me, or I shouldn't be having it. And I guess that is emotional. That is, that's I'm receiving a feeling of gratification, which is an emotion, at that moment, and it does make me feel better.
Thank you for sharing that, Bernie. Let me ask you a question. You brought up this idea of certain foods you aren't allowed to have. And so then your mind would take you to, okay, let's hurry up and, we can eat this in the privacy of our home, or, let's eat this while nobody's looking. So,
Or absolutely. I mean, I would even close my eyes to make sure I wasn't looking. I mean, it's like if you
I
don't
can't see it.
yeah, there's no such thing as calories involved in that, or good or bad. And Rebecca, let me go ahead and say this before you get into it here. I have shifted my thinking from, knowing that there truly aren't any bad foods.
Mm-hmm.
There are just better choices that I could be making in that moment, um, to achieve the results that I want to have long term. But yeah, I would have to say, initially there were definitely big bad foods,
Mm-hmm.
and there were these super little happy, halo wearing foods as well that I felt I had to be eating when I was around um, the public.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, but I think the thing that you're bringing up, though, is that there's sort of this fall in line. This is how you should be behaving. And it takes a lot of effort to continue to follow the rules. And that is tiring.
Absolutely.
And when other things happen in your day and that also tire you, or you spend a lot of effort trying to resist certain foods that you're not supposed to have, that then if something happens to you emotionally, it could just be being tired or bored, or it could just be you had a really busy day and want a reward. That food can be one of those rewards, or you fought off a craving and then you just kind of get too tired from fighting it, and that's the brain will do that. But it's saying, okay, well, hurry up and do this because, you don't want somebody to see, or you don't really want to own that it's okay to have it.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's how I felt, and it's funny because you brought up a situation where it's like, okay, you're fighting this craving all day, and then your next bit of advice to me was, well, or not advice, but the way you assessed it was, you fight it off all day, then you get tired. Me, I fought off the craving all day, and I feel as though I deserve a reward for fighting it off all day, and that's what I go towards. So it wasn't even, oh, I'm tired. It's like, look at you do so well at fighting that off, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, now I can have it because I fought that off. No, it's really interesting. You're right. I mean, emotion from an emotional standpoint, I did eat a lot when I was bored. I find myself doing that now, or
Mm-hmm.
tired. But it's a challenge because I'm also finding myself, okay, so I'm a new dad, and one of the things that people do, and it's wonderful, is they tend to bring over meals and food, and I thank you for that, for all the wonderful people that have done that for us. But it's so easy to just overconsume in times of happiness as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, literally, my family was a type, and I I go back and forth with this still is, food is a part of everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a celebration when there's a birthday, or there's a graduation, or, a quinceañera, or whatever's going on. And then, when times aren't so good, Lord forbid someone pass, or, we're grieving together. I mean, there's a huge meal that goes with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't visit one person in my family without them offering to feed me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't eat, then it's almost like you're kicking them, right in the gut if you
Mm-hmm.
don't eat. So it's etiquette as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but do you think, well, I guess the other question is, what is concerning you personally now about your emotional eating habits? Because, I mean, certainly in all those scenarios, I mean, those all sound like scenarios where, food is going to be involved, and it's not about saying no to eating around that food as long as you're respecting your body. So it's almost two different things. They're sort of like, food isn't something that should be resisted or feared. And food is part of celebrations, and, food is part of how people mourn together. None of that's going to go away. and I don't necessarily think that is emotional eating, because we're emotional creatures. We're always feeling emotions. If you have any like emotional eating that's followed by guilt or shame, that feels mindless, that kind of thing.
So let me share this with you. So I understand, and I know that we have some listeners out there that are experiencing emotional eating in the way that you just shared. And I do feel as though maybe previously or in the past, that was definitely me. I did go to food to feel better, to comfort myself when I was sad. I did go to food when I was nervous about a job interview or arguing with a significant other. I mean, yes. But let me kind of share with you where I'm at now, Rebecca. I almost feel numb. I don't know if you've ever been told this by a client, but um, whether I thought it was my favorite food before, and it would have brought me some sense of maybe happiness or brought back feelings, of fond memories. I don't feel that anymore. Um, I definitely, I just kind of feel indifferent about what it is that I'm eating, whether it's out at a gourmet restaurant or if it's literally made here in my home kitchen. Uh, I just feel numb. And don't get me wrong, it's not the type of numb that just shuts me off from eating, and I know that there are people out there that are definitely battling that. But for me, it's more of, I'll continue to consume, but just have a feeling of numbness around it. I know, I know. That's what I myself, I don't know. I guess in the past, we as a kid, you hear the ice cream truck. You run out there. It's a great experience. You're excited that food brings you joy, okay, in that moment. Or if it's a home cooked meal from grandma or grandpa or whoever. Um, I've reached a point in my life where I just feel numb to it, and I don't know if that's indicative of just my battle with food, or if there's something more going on there that maybe needs to be addressed in order for me to be successful in um, living healthier.
Okay, so you talk about this feeling of numbness. So do you ever eat when you're not hungry now?
I do. I absolutely do. Um, if I grabbed it, so a typical day for me, breakfast will get in there on a good day, not always. Um, Lunch will get in there on a good day, not always. And then I do see myself pushing meals back. Now, I know that this right here is not the way that I want to continue moving forward. I know that it's just not healthy. I feel it in my body. I don't say that I binge eat at the end of the day. But if I have a late lunch and then I come home and Jennifer's getting ready to have dinner or has made dinner, then I will sit down with her to have dinner, knowing full well that if we're, going by, let's say, the hunger scale that you introduced to me a while back, I am well past that number 7 zone, guys, and what that means is that I am not really feeling as though I should be eating. It's literally I don't need to go put anything, or actually, yeah, I just don't need to be consuming anything at that point.
So you get past comfortable full, kind of
Oh,
closer to
absolutely, yeah,
start.
because the time was so close together. I had eaten a late lunch, and I'm past comfortable full, but I'm still going to go ahead and have dinner with my wife. And she would understand. My wife is not the type that would say, Bernie, why aren't you eating this with me? She'd say, oh, you're not feeling hungry? No big deal. I'm going to go ahead and feed myself, but later on that's there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in I think you answered your own question with that. Like, it sounds like actually the whole thing is unstructured. With like sometimes I do breakfast, sometimes I don't. I would argue that the body kindness approach is, you know, you don't let your kid go too long without feeding your kid, right?
Absolutely not. No. And she would let me know. Yeah. No, but
I know.
no, that's a really great way to put it, Rebecca. I've shared something like that in the past with people that I've spoken to, but to hear it again is actually refreshing because I know that I would never let my little girl go without eating, especially if she was telling me. And
Mm-hmm.
how does she tell me? By literally screaming her little brains out. And I love her voice, and boy is she loud. I know that my body's doing the same thing throughout the course of the day, but I have just become so used to not hearing that
Mm-hmm.
and neglecting that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times where just my energy level is so low that it's amazing that I even consider myself quote unquote working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not focusing on anything. I can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is it that what is it that you want to be able to do? What is it that you want for food?
Well, for me, it's continuing to work. It's not even work because let's face it, I'm not working on it right now. I need to figure out how I can put together a very realistic, uh, um, structured meal. I guess meal times. You know, uh, I guess we all are dealing with this. Okay, how do I fit this in? Every day's different. I have these responsibilities. Sometimes I can get breakfast, sometimes I can't. I know I'm not alone in this, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
But my thing is, I guess how can I have a healthier relationship with food and with myself to know that stopping or making time for breakfast or stopping or taking time for lunch is so important and needed, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever else I'm doing really could be placed on hold for however long it takes me to get this food in.
Well, what is so? It sounds like, I mean, is your voice saying anything else besides, "Oh, you're busy, you don't have time to eat, you got to get going on that next thing"? I mean, does it tell you anything else besides you don't have time, like in the mornings or whatever? Starting there.
um my body's grown so accustomed to not even getting some breakfast in here and there that I don't even look for it now. And believe me, when I was feeling healthier, my body literally let me know, hey, you are hungry. And at that point I would stop what I was doing, go and eat something that I had already planned or had purchased, knowing that that would be a food that I would eat, say, for breakfast or for lunch, or that I could, go grab quickly. Um, for me, it's almost as though it would have to be uh, taking the time to pre make meals,
Mm-hmm.
pre um, just make sure that my fridge and cupboards are stocked with things that I feel good about consuming. I'm no longer scared of eating or overeating, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's times where I know that I have gone past, on that hunger scale where I just don't need to be putting something else in to my body. But I think more than anything, it's the choices and foods that I'm making because I'm not pre-planning
Mm-hmm.
or taking the time to really do um, some form of meal prep. I know, I mean, there's extremes when it comes to meal prep. I have people that are literally grinding grain, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have others that are putting pre-made salads into a container, and they're all great, and I'm not doing any of those right now. So maybe that's it.
I
So when
mean,
I'm missing lunch, so I'm so sorry to cut you. When I'm
no.
missing lunch, a lot of it isn't just, oh, I purposely want to show the people around me how hard I'm working, or
Mm-hmm.
I want to prove to myself how hard I'm working. It's, what, man, I didn't plan,
Mm-hmm.
and the only option I have to eat is something that would be close to where I work, and I don't like those options for myself. So sometimes it's almost like a conscious, I'd rather just not eat
Mm-hmm.
until I get to but if I cared that much, I'm thinking to myself, well, why don't you just pre-plan then?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird dynamic there.
Well, it sounds like you have reasons to plan. I and reasons not to plan. On the one hand, it would help me eat better. On the other hand, it's going to take effort. One of the things I work with clients on is talking about their options, just like you did here. You talked a lot about, if I planned and had the food around that I know how to do, I remember a time when I did that and I ate better, I had more energy, my body would tell me if I missed a meal that it was time to eat. That was all stuff that you said to me that you pulled out from identifying that I realized that it's the planning, that when I get that habit right, a lot of the other things will fall in line.
Absolutely.
It's kind of making sense about the numb. I think there's still more to look at that and we can see, but when people are feeling like, a lot of times it's like tired for working at something, like, they've gone on and off diets for most of their life, or they've thought about food so much, what to eat, what not to eat. It's like, I was done thinking about food,
Oh, absolutely. I can totally relate to that, because that was my life. And again, it's not just as a result of the show. The show is not at fault for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that was self-imposed. And for the years following that, that was my mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Get out there, prepare it, make sure it's right. Where did it come from?
Mm-hmm.
Farm to table, who grew it, what type of fertilizer do they use? I mean, I was in it, and I was exhausted as a result of it.
Yeah, because it's all driven out of fear. We're not supposed to be afraid to eat, and we're not supposed to let fear drive choices. Body kindness is about realizing that your body, exactly as it is today, this very second that we're talking, that your body as it is right now is deserving of love and respect, caring. When you talk about numbness, that's pretty much the opposite of connection, which is one of the body kindness pillars: love, connection, caring. And so I think that it's a lot of putting your self-care on the back burner, and it makes sense because exhausted from overthinking food based on fear. But biologically, you go all day and you're skipping breakfast because you're too busy, got to get out the door, and you're skipping lunch because you don't want to order from the takeout down the road. You are so biologically famished that your hormones are saying we need salt, sugar, and fat. And that is going to be what you're driven towards because of, human survival.
No, absolutely. And that makes, I've never heard it that way. It makes sense. I appreciate you saying that. I know that what we're talking about here is emotional eating. And I'm telling you, before I would have been able to, really, really just go on and on about the emotional eating aspect of it. But what I'm raising today, Rebecca, is where I'm at. And it is that feeling of numbness, which you just addressed. And I appreciate you saying, because, I know that we have listeners out there that are truly, struggling or trying to understand why their emotions are leading them to overconsumption or the consumption of things that maybe aren't as nourishing for their bodies.
Emotions can lead to restrictive thoughts too. I mean, we are feeling creatures, like I said earlier. So I believe you are feeling emotions, but I believe that in the way you're describing numbness, it's the lack of kind of connection, of like just calling a truce with yourself and saying, you know what, I'm here to take care of you and your needs matter too. And as a family, we're going to do what we can, a little bit of planning and prep, and doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to get going in the direction. And to give yourself a couple of days of just sticking to a very simple, this is breakfast, this is lunch, this is dinner plan, that there might be some of those feelings that you had when you ate better and felt better before. Or even just a little kind of spiral of energy that you feel grateful that you took the time for your breakfast.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see me really taking away a lot of that, feeling grateful that I threw myself in the mix and considered myself uh, in preparing something. Story, one story that I remember was I remember being off the show. It had been for a while. I had this craving for a hamburger, and I think that what I was looking for, and I'll explain this a little further, was not necessarily the hamburger. It was the feeling of maybe happiness or adolescence. I don't know. I was looking for something in this hamburger, a taste. And I was out there and I tried several different types. I could never find what in my mind um, a hamburger should have tasted like. And I just
Mm-hmm.
remember being so sad about it. like
Mm.
like I was because I mean obviously before I had really related a lot of my past experiences, good, bad, ugly, with certain types of food. And I remember I was searching for something in a hamburger and just and to this day, still haven't been able to really, I guess, for lack of a better term, like just connect with a hamburger or cheeseburger in the same way. I can't believe it. Yeah,
You
but
have a
that's it.
nostalgic feeling for a certain type
Yes.
of
Yeah,
hamburger.
and it doesn't I haven't found it. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't found it since well before my experience.
Um, so, I do think um, that what we were talking about with respect to energy and what's driving food choices and everything like that, I do think that matters. Just to help address, as you brought up earlier, um, eating a later lunch and so close to dinner. Again, I think some of that would get resolved by just structuring out your day with meals that you planned. But you're right in that you can sit down with someone to dinner and respect your body still. So you eat the amount of food that you feel comfortable, even if you're not hungry at all, and take a herbal tea or a glass of water to the table and just, hey, I had a late lunch, but I'd love to sit and chat with you. It is very important to stay connected and just feel how you feel in your body in that moment. And that the connection to the body is one of the things that go when someone's not happy with the habits they have, and when they don't have self-compassion, when they're not allowed to be in this place they don't want to be. So it's like, yours might be, there might be a perfectionistic idea, like, well, if you can't do what you did on The Biggest Loser, don't do it at all. Or a critic, I can't believe that, this is what you're doing, and that harshness doesn't allow for a softer, kinder voice that, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. I'm here to look out for you. I'm here to take care of you. Self-compassion really allows a person to create new habits because it says it's okay to fail. Self-compassion says we're going to focus on the behavior and the habit. We're not going to judge the person. Self-compassion says that, I'm going to be accountable to my choices, but I'm also going to let myself make mistakes. And I'm going to say that's all right. What can we learn from mistakes? How can we grow? And let's try again. And so, I would just encourage you to think about kind of what we talked about today and how you describe spending a typical day. And think about some things that you could do that you think is more in line with the way you would recommend a friend, plan and schedule his day, and start to try to do that for yourself. And that's a way that you can express self-compassion, is by just start to try to plan and do what you would tell a friend to do as rational and realistic. And you might get more pushback from your mind. Oh, but there's no time. Oh, this is dumb. We have thoughts all the time. They're always constantly flowing in our heads, and we can't control them. We can't control what they say. But our thoughts aren't always helpful. And so when you have thoughts that are telling you you can't and why bother, or it doesn't matter, they're not really helping you live your values, the kind of dad you want to be that you've talked to me about, that get your energy back, that kind of thing. So really start to get curious about what you're thinking and just start the process of recognizing that your thoughts are just a bunch of words. They're just words that you say to yourself. When you take them to heart, when you listen to what the thought says, that's when you get into trouble. So when it says, oh, you don't have time for breakfast, and you listen to it, you get your low energy, you're setting your body up for biologically overeating later. Breeze through lunch. Oh, well, Bernie, you don't want any of that other food at those places either. I mean, do you really know that there's not something, a lean piece of protein you could get, some veggies, something that would energize you? So I think that there's, it's getting you to avoid eating. It's getting you to avoid planning. And then when you do eat, it's saying, oh, we haven't eaten all day now, but then causing you to get uncomfortably full. And so those thoughts aren't helpful. And one way, and this really tackles emotionally eating, even though you might not necessarily see how, it all fits or even what you're talking about is emotional, but you have these thoughts and they're not helpful. If you let yourself feel numb anyway, numbness is okay. It's a type of an emotion and it will go away. If you let yourself say whatever you're going to say in your voice, feel how you're going to feel anyway, acknowledge it. We call making room for it. Hey, hello, numbness. How you doing? And then you make the choice that is how you want Bernie to be. So it's the ability to feel, numb, hear these negative thoughts and say, okay, you guys can be here tonight, but I'm sitting down to dinner and I need to respect that I'm not that hungry right now. And I need to eat the amount of food that I need right now. And that's what I'm going to remain committed to.
And I know our listeners can't see me, but I'm definitely shaking my head in agreement. I think, in hearing Rebecca respond to what I've shared, I think that even one of the reasons why I have been feeling so numb is because I know that my schedule is off. I know that I'm going towards maybe things that aren't reflective of who I want to be as a person later on during my meal. And rather than to critique myself at that point, which is what I normally would do or have done, I just choose to shut all switches off. It's let me just shut this switch off. I appreciate you really talking with me about where I'm coming from, because I almost felt as though I was isolated in my numbness. Because when we talk about emotional eating, Rebecca, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this on over to you, I always looked at it differently, and I considered myself and what I was feeling or not feeling outside of that. But can you share with me some experiences that maybe you've come across or your clients have shared with you? And the reason why I'm asking you to do this, Rebecca, is because I know we have listeners out there that maybe might be able to relate to somebody else's situation. Can you share something about that with me?
Sure. So your scenario I've heard lots of times.
Oh my goodness. I don't want to say thank God, but I know there's a little bit of comfort in me knowing that there are other people like me out there.
Yeah. It's a lot with chronic dieters, with people who are used to restricting their calories, which I know is part of the Biggest Loser plan, and any other diet that you've done before where you've restricted calories. It becomes a celebration to not eat, and it becomes go you didn't eat, go you didn't eat. But your body finally says, forget you.
Yeah, I like it.
Overdoes it.
That F word, forget you, yes.
But other scenarios would be, like, for example, I have a client who knows how to eat balanced, and breakfast and lunch is fine. She struggles with perfectionism and never feeling good enough, stays at work way too late, doesn't get her workout in, comes home to dinner, doesn't plan, but kind of on purpose, she's acknowledging, because then that way dinner can be a couple of cheese sticks, then a bag of potato chips. And, it's like, oh, I didn't plan, But as we're talking, she knows how to cook healthy meals. I mean, she has 3 grown adult children. So she's cooked healthy meals for kids for years. And she knows breakfast and lunch is fine. So what is happening is that the way that she regulates certain feelings she's having, being lonely, not having enough fun in her life, feeling inadequate for what she's able to do at work, the perfectionism, then it's like, this is the one good thing she gets to do. And so in her mind, eating the bag of chips is the reward. It's the one source of joy, or the one good thing she gets to do. And that's what makes it so hard for her, is because she knows that afterwards, when she feels guilty, that it really wasn't a good thing. But what her voice says to her is, you need this. And she still is in that belief system where she thinks she does. And she's habituated the belief that she needs it, because our beliefs come out of thoughts we repeat over and over and over again. That's where I was telling you thoughts aren't always helpful. Mm-hmm. So we had worked on a plan of planning your meals, shopping from a grocery list, and then sticking to that list. And she tried, and she was at the store and said, you know what? You had a rough week with blah, blah, blah. And so you need the chips.
See, and that's so interesting to me, because the person that you just described to me obviously is highly motivated, highly intelligent, thoughtful, caring. She raised 3 children, but yet still, is overcome by her emotions and I don't want to say the word gives in, but really, succumbs to not caring for herself, maybe in the way that she would a loved one. Mm-hmm. And I know that's who's listening out there, Rebecca. Mm-hmm. We are speaking to knowledgeable people who know about what's out there, what they should be doing, what advice they would give to somebody they loved. As a matter of fact, I had a friend ask me the other day, hey, Bernie, I'm doing this, I'm feeling better, but what do you do when you still want to reach for the pizza, and I told him, well, then you reach for the pizza, but you do it in a different way than maybe you would have before. I've kind of put on my Rebecca hat a bit, but you're absolutely right. I'm able to speak on these things, but yet still feel as though I fall victim to my emotions.
Well, I think the one thing to keep in mind is that all emotions, good and bad, positive and negative, they all have a purpose. And if you don't have permission to feel the bad emotions, feeling lonely, feeling tired, feeling angry, if you don't have permission to feel that way, if you don't make room for those bad feelings to come and go away, then there usually is something that a person will do to numb themselves or to try to avoid feeling those feelings. And, some people drink, some people compulsively shop, some people do drugs, some people eat. You had mentioned earlier that you had felt like you used the word addiction, and it's a touchy subject, whole separate podcast, but in my work, I consider the eating pattern a habituated process. So if you end up going to foods to eat emotionally, it's because you've learned the routine by repeating it over and again. And sure, certain foods are easy to overeat. We hear a lot about sugar and sugar addiction and everything like that. And I do want to touch on that more in a future podcast because it's worth it. But I think the thing to keep in mind is it's not just any amount of sugar. Like, obviously fruit is okay, and we all shouldn't be drinking sodas all day long. So, there's a healthy boundary there. It's when it's excessive. So the balanced plate, that I show in the Feel Great Guide is a very nutritious balanced plate. And you do need to be mindful of the quality of foods you're consuming and everything like that. But you don't have to feel like if you were to eat a piece of birthday cake that because there's sugar in it and because you eat emotionally that you're addicted and everything like that. But, some people identify as there are certain foods that they cannot eat and they won't let themselves have it. And so it's a touchy subject and a personal subject for how you choose to pursue it and pursue your healing and your full recovery out of it. But without question, there's a behavioral pattern related to I'm having these unhelpful thoughts. I have these negative feelings and I don't want to feel this way. And food is my reward, although not in the big picture. Food is my pleasure, although not in the big picture. Or food is just the thing I can do without hurting myself in other worse ways. So it is, like I said when we started, it's not something that's going to get completely resolved in just one podcast. I am hoping that listeners will write in their questions and their struggles with emotional eating, and we can address more questions on the next show. I think that could be really interesting. And just know that you're not alone. We're all in this together, and that there are ways to get out of the cycle of emotional eating, not being happy or satisfied with the way you're eating food, but bring it back to the pattern, like with what's going on with you. Like, you're not satisfied about skipping meals, and to know that you have it in your power. You have everything you need. You've done it before. You have it in your power to take one step that helps with the planning. And that's how people change habits, one step after another, after another. And building in that ability to hear this voice telling you, don't waste your time on this and that, or to feel negative things, to feel this resistance to planning and eating your 3 meals a day. But you do that stuff anyways because that's the person you're trying to be. And you practice trying to be the person you want to become.
And I like that word practice, because right there it just takes away the whole responsibility of already being in the big leagues,
yes.
Or being there. So I can definitely appreciate that. And I just like to reiterate what Rebecca asked, which was, if we have listeners out there that are also experiencing, exactly what we've talked about today, and are in the midst of their own emotional eating stories and battles here, please submit those questions to us. I'd love an opportunity to just hear where you're coming from. And like Rebecca said, we are all in this together. So I encourage our listeners to submit those questions.
Cool. Let's just, we've got a few more minutes left. Let's just talk for a couple seconds about some of the things we've seen in the news. I wanted to bring up an article that I'll share in the show notes, and it's along the lines of what we were talking about earlier. And essentially, it was a research study that showed that when you use negative messages in marketing or public health campaigns, or just negative reinforcing type messages that sound like food policey, that it actually causes dieters to rebel, and the more unhealthy you say something is, the more the person eats it. So I thought that to be really fascinating because the idea is you're putting out there, don't eat this hamburger, it might cause heart disease, and when you do that, it just really kind of makes a person say, oh, forget you, I don't trust you, I'm going to eat more. And what that really has to do with is someone's autonomy. And we all feel like one of our basic human rights is the power of choice. And so by putting messages out there where you're trying to control people, it has the opposite effect because people don't want to be controlled. And I relay this a lot to the whole mindset of dieting because dieting is about control. Dieting is about deprivation. Dieting is about follow the rules. Dieting is about restriction. And it only can last so long before our human nature rebels against the rule following, rebels because we know we can't do it forever. So I'll share the link in the show notes, but the bottom line is that, you definitely don't want to overeat cheeseburgers because you saw an ad saying don't do that, but just to really be aware that if you're getting negative food police messages in your social media feeds and stuff, that might psychologically trigger eating the very thing that it's trying to tell you not to. So stick to your own rules, stick to your own preferences, do what feels good for you, and don't listen to the noise that you hear, everyone else out there saying you should do. You need to make your own choices.
It's a really, really interesting article. I want to make sure everybody clicks on the link for that one. I do have a question that came from a listener. So whenever we get these questions, I get really excited, Rebecca, because that means there is somebody out there listening to us. So the question reads from Chicago. Hi, Chicago. I miss you. All right, here we go. It says, I tried to do intuitive eating, and I feel like it just gives me an excuse to eat whatever I want. How can I do intuitive eating if I don't trust myself to eat healthy? Signed, Sad in Chicago. Oh, nobody should be sad in Chicago. My hometown, I miss you. I'm going to pass this one on over to Rebecca. And don't get me wrong, this was one of my initial, I don't even want to say critiques, but thoughts when it came to intuitive eating was, that kind of just lets me reach for whatever I want if that's what I'm feeling, Rebecca. And I know that's not the case, but how would you address this?
Yeah. So this is someone who it sounds like she is early in her process of intuitive eating. So if she were my client, the first thing that I would want to ask her, I don't know if it's a girl actually, it's just Sad in Chicago, but
it says she. Okay.
Says
she.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she
okay.
says.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I would say to her, I would kind of get a sense of how early she was in the experience and everything like that, and I would get a sense of how she's using the principles, because if she was kind of doing what you're doing and like not necessarily eating breakfast or she might not be kind of on a structured eating pattern that you eat in the morning and then you wait till you're hungry and then you eat again. That could be causing her cravings to go out of whack a little bit, so under eating than overeating. That could be part of it. The other thing that I would ask about is her inner voice, which is what we talked about earlier. But if her inner voice is saying, oh, intuitive eating is never going to work for you, and then it's saying, oh, it's intuitive eating, we're going to, order a bunch of takeout and eat it right out of the box, it's intuitive eating, her voice might be getting in her way, because she calls it an excuse to eat whatever I want. Well, you have a right to own your choices about what you eat. If you're practicing honoring your health for intuitive eating, you're striving for the balanced plate. So you're thinking about what you enjoy, but you're also thinking about nutrition. And so the excuse problem that she's having, I almost wonder if it's emotional eating layered on intuitive eating. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So
I could
like
see that.
where
Yeah.
the
And
emotional eater is using intuitive eating as a guise, to
and,
keep
and
eating emotionally.
and Rebecca, another thing that I see a lot, and I've heard a lot, is this whole uh, idea of I don't trust myself
Mm-hmm.
uh, um, to eat healthy. Well, but in general, I just don't trust
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I have had thoughts like that in the
Mm-hmm.
past. I don't trust. It's not what I feel right now, but I know there's quite a few people out there
Yeah.
that just don't trust themselves to even maybe start looking into intuitive eating.
Yeah. Her voice might be saying, you can't handle it. Look at all the times you've overeaten, or this has been a problem your whole life. So that's self-doubt. And like I was mentioning you earlier, she could really use some self-compassion and say, you know what, I'm having some unhelpful thoughts that this isn't going to work, but they're just words. And I am willing to work with intuitive eating. If past experiences may have some fear that she's feeling, but having doubt that something's going to work is different than saying you don't have the ability to try. And to learn and grow is about working with our belief in ourself and our ability to try and our willingness to try and fail and try again and fail. That's how we learn and grow, and that's how we change a habit. So I would just be very encouraging and say, keep working with intuitive eating, and you can give yourself through meal planning kind of a structure of eating that doesn't feel like deprivation, but that does feel like that the part of you that is trying to eat foods you enjoy and balance nutrition, that person's in charge and do the planning. And then if your voice comes in and trying to get you to, eat in ways you don't trust yourself, really question, is that really emotional eating? And maybe what you're dealing with is what anyone dealing with emotional eating needs to do the work to overcome, and that's having permission to feel the feelings and having a better way of managing your feelings. You don't overcome emotional eating by taking bubble baths, but if you feel stressed and tired, not working late, not being on social media, reading a little bit or taking a nice bath, but something that feels rewarding besides a food reward. And just keep working at it, because it's worth it. And no matter how long it takes, it's worth the continued focus and this self-compassion of, it's going to be okay if I make a mistake. I'll learn and grow and try again.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Is this something, Rebecca, as well? And I just wanted to pair this up, or let me know that she could maybe even utilize the hunger number with, if that's how she felt, maybe just to kind of start off, if she doesn't quote unquote trust herself enough,
Mm-hmm.
maybe use your scale to kind of start gauging how hungry she was, to maybe then incorporate the foods that she is wanting.
Yeah, I absolutely. So the hunger number, I'll share that in the show notes. It was in a blog that I did about how you can use mindfulness to transform your eating habits. And that's a way of staying connected to your body and checking in and kind of trying to see how hungry you are and notice when you're eating how full you're getting. So that would be great for her to stay checked in and focused, and that eating in a certain range lets you know that you are letting yourself eat enough food and nourish your body, but also tries to prevent you from kind of saying screw it and disconnecting from that, connection, that tune in point, and overeating. So that could be helpful.
I really do, for the listeners out there, really enjoyed the scale. So go check it on out, because it's nothing that's complicated. You're not going to have to do long division here. It's really nice and simple, and it's funny. You can hear Rebecca's voice in this. So I know that since I've looked into it, it's really made me think a little bit more about where I am Am I hangry is one of the things that she has in there. And I have allowed myself to be hangry throughout my work week. So, and it goes from there. So I do encourage you to look into that.
Oh, cool. Well, in the last couple of seconds that we have left, I wanted to bring up a couple of things. So we are still doing the Boost Your Mood with Body Kindness Challenge. And I wanted to share some tips about fitness and mood. And essentially, the way you can be in the challenges is by signing up for my email list. And you get weekly emails with recipes, exercise tips. You get what I'm blogging about, and that's free. And you can get that at my website. I'll include a link in the show notes there. But for fitness and mood, it's actually very interesting that even if you don't feel like you're in a good mood, having a workout is energy providing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an intense workout. It could be something that it could be playing with your kids. It could be walking your dog. It could be, getting lost in a class that you really are enjoying. But we tend to feel better after exercise, and yet it tends to be the thing that we give up on when we just want to plop down on the couch and lay there. Or when we say, I just don't have the energy to work out. It's actually might be when you need the workout because it can help bring more energy to you. So, we get, are good endorphins from exercise, and actually usually when there's a bit of intensity you get a higher endorphin, so you don't have to go for very long. But even things like jumping jacks and some jump squats, if those are in your capabilities, those are types of things, short heart rate bursts that will kind of instantly lift your mood up. So I would just encourage your listeners to plan and schedule regular exercise and make sure you do it in a way that feels good and invigorating, and know that that any amount you get in is better than zero. And if you get to go outside and get that sunshine, you're also going to get that vitamin D, which also boosts your mood too. So good luck with that fitness and mood challenge. And if you get on my email list, you'll get lots more tips, and we'll be introducing the next month's challenge on the next podcast. I also wanted to let everyone know that we are excited to introduce a book club, and we will be doing a book club once a month and discussing the book through the podcast. And so it should be no surprise that our first book is going to be Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. So you can pick that up, your bookstore, Amazon, all those types of places, you can, through the Intuitive Eating website. But if you haven't listened yet, grab it. They have it on audiobook, so you can walk and listen. And we will be discussing the book in the next show.
I'd like to encourage all of our listeners to take part in our book club challenge, especially Sad in Chicago. Let's get you feeling a lot better about intuitive eating, the ins and outs. And again, always love to leave our listeners by encouraging you to go build a healthy and happy life that you love. And most important, be kind to yourself. This is Bernie and Rebecca signing off. We love you guys.